busy week, but I don't think we can think of a better way of starting the week than being here and at St. A's, the Institute of Politics, and having BAE once again being our sponsor of this event and so many other events throughout the year. So we say thank you to BAE, thank you, and in particular Tom Bishop, who represents BAE and in the community and does a fabulous job. And we're grateful for his support, his friendship, and all that he does for the community. But BAE, solid gold, and anything going on in the neighborhood here in this great state, a worthy cause, chances pretty good. BAE is one of the sponsors, so they're engaged, involved, and committed to the community. So, thank you. The New England Council's off to a very busy start. Today we have the distinguished Congressman Chris Pappas. Tomorrow we have Congresswoman Trahan speaking in Boston. Thursday morning we'll be in Washington, D.C. for Congresswoman Goodlander, who'll be speaking to the New England Council. And we'll be back here Friday morning with the senator from the great state of Iowa, Joni Ernst, who'll be speaking to the New England Council. And after that, we will rest for a day, and then we'll be going to Rhode Island. Congressman Amo will be speaking to the New England Council. Senator Reed will be speaking to the New England Council. So we have a lot of events coming up. Congressman Jim McGovern's going to be speaking in Boston on rare diseases, and we have a great panel for that, and just a very, very busy time for the New England Council, to say the least. But we thank all of you who are members of the New England Council, because we can only do what we do. Without the support of you, it would be very difficult. So I just say thank you. But other than that, I can go into that. We have a Washington event coming up. Registration just opened last week. The Washington Leaders Conference, May 13th and 14th. Great event. We have about 300 people come down from all 6 New England states, and they have an opportunity to meet with the congressional members, congressional staff, people from the media, people from the administration. You know, we had our board meeting last year. We had 4 people from the administration speak to our board. So we have a great cross-section of representation of the Washington policymakers speaking to the New England Council. But it's a great, great opportunity to go down for 2 days to meet other New Englanders, but to meet the staffs, the members of the delegation. The congressman has 100% attendance, no pressure, but you want to keep that. You want to keep that, and it's a great event. And if you're interested in coming down, you can see Larry Zabar from the office and myself. We'd be more than happy to get you registered to attend. So we're here now to talk to our distinguished member of Congress who's serving his fourth term. And he is somebody that I can honestly say is somebody who spends a lot of time going around New England and meeting with the members of the delegation, that he is universally respected on both sides of the aisle in Washington. He is somebody that I've often said, and I've used that term before, some people go to Washington to make a name. Other people go there to make a difference. And Congressman Chris Pappas is there to make a difference and to work on some very, very difficult problems. But across the aisle, he finds allies. And we can get into a couple of pieces of legislation that he's working on that he has bipartisan support. So it's a gift that you all know is something that we need right now, working across the aisle on some of the most important issues. He works most of his time in the Small Business Committee, Veterans Affairs, Transportation, and Infrastructure. And he was put on transportation infrastructure very early in his career. That's one of the most sought-after committees. And you're really chosen by your colleagues. And there are a lot of people that want to be on transportation and infrastructure. And they put him on very, very early, which just reinforces what I said, how he's thought of by his fellow colleagues. So it's a great advocate to have for your district here. So with that, Congressman, I want to welcome you to New England Council, and I want to thank Neil Levesque, who's walking around somewhere. The use of there he is sitting in the back and laughing at you, Congressman, not me, he's laughing at me. And he does a great job here in the Institute of Politics, and thank you for allowing us to come in here. So with that, I had questions already prepared on Friday.
Okay.
Obviously,
you're going to rip those up now?
Things have changed since Friday. So let's talk about what's happened over the weekend with the United States involvement in Iran and decapitating the Supreme Leader and just about all of his cabinet members. Your reaction when you heard the news that we were, I think the President used the term, going to war?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all here, and thank you to St. Anselm College and the Institute of Politics for hosting us, and to all the student ambassadors who are out there. Thanks for the warm welcome here today. And Neil, great to see you. He'll refresh your coffee if you need any seconds. And Jim, thank you to you and Larry and the New England Council for creating this forum. And you have a busy schedule, not just this week, but each and every week, to create the kind of conversations about the important issues of the day. And nothing could be more important than the security of the United States and issues around war and peace. And it's one of the reasons I'm deeply concerned with the way this administration has launched into this operation without providing members of the Article I branch of our government, Congress, with information about the intentions of these strikes, about this operation. And certainly this appears to be a commitment that is going to go well beyond just a strike or two over a couple days or a weekend. The President has indicated this is 4 to 6 weeks in terms of what he estimates the U.S. commitment will be in terms of military operations. We all have to mourn now that 4 service members have lost their lives in these operations. We all have to think about their families and the tremendous sacrifice that they and so many others who have signed up to give everything up to and including their lives for the defense of the United States of America have given. We owe them a debt of gratitude that we all have to continue to work to pay down. But this should be about how we keep our country safe. No one can doubt that Iran is the head of the snake. They export terror across the Middle East and around the world. They have targeted and chanted death to America over the course of decades. And no one should be losing sleep that the Ayatollah has been decapitated and that he has been eliminated. That is a positive development for the people of Iran as far as I'm concerned, and for the long-term security of the region. But what comes next is the big question. And we haven't had those questions answered by this administration in terms of what the strategy is and what the risks are and the plan for the day after. And so I'm deeply concerned that the Ayatollah may be off the playing field and members of the upper echelon of the IRGC and the Iranian regime have been eliminated. But who comes next? And how does this create a safer position for the United States and our allies in the region? That's the big question right now. So we're going to get a full briefing tomorrow, both House and Senate members. There have been very few that have been looped into the conversation, really just a few members of the Gang of Eight, members of the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees that have been on the receiving end of calls from General Kane and from other members of this administration. That's inexcusable. I really fundamentally believe that the people, through their elected representatives, should be making big decisions about war and peace in this nation. I think that for too long, the legislative branch has ceded authority to the executive branch in terms of war making. And I think for something as extended and as serious as what is underway right now, we really need to make sure that the power to give authorization to the President rests with Congress. So I'll support a war powers resolution this week when it comes before the Congress that says that the President needs authority from the legislative branch to conduct these operations. Again, this is done with the best interests of our troops and our national security in mind, and I think there's going to be bipartisan support for that in the House.
And what do you think the chances are of that passing both the House and the Senate?
Well, I think the chances of it passing the House and Senate and being signed by the President are pretty slim. But I think it passing the House would send a pretty strong message that there are both Republicans and Democrats that want to ensure that the American people have transparency and have the ability to weigh in on something as momentous as what we're seeing happen right now. So again, this is about how we keep our country safe. And I think it's on the administration to come to Congress and the American people to tell us how this operation is actually going to make our nation safer and protect American lives. That's what always has to be the central question in terms of military operations.
You know, it's a lot easier to get into a war than to get out of a war. And I think that's the question that a lot of people are asking. What's the goal? Is it regime change? Is it, to cease in the enrichment of the uranium? That's where the confusion seems to be, is what is the goal and what is the intent? And if it is regime change, can you do that from the sky? And that's where some people get concerned to say, you know, does that mean troops eventually? So there just seems to be so much confusion. So I guess you would probably go along with some of your colleagues who say the president should address not just Congress, but maybe the nation, to explain where we are, why we're there, and what we plan to do in the next couple of weeks. But it seems like there was no consultation with members of Congress at all. And there are some people who say the war powers, depending on how you look at it, he does have the opportunity to do what he wants to do temporarily and then report maybe to Congress. Your interpretation of the war powers?
If there's an imminent threat to the United States, something that is about to happen that's going to cause harm to our troops, to our homeland, then absolutely the president has the authority to take military action. If there's an existing authorization, as was the case during Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a big public debate around those, the use of military force in both of those cases. So the American people, through their elected representatives, were able to weigh in. But that's not happening here. I rewind a few months to the strikes on the military, on the nuclear assets in Iran, which this administration said obliterated the nuclear capabilities of Iran. We haven't seen more specific intelligence on that, but clearly it didn't obliterate their nuclear ambitions, which is why I think we needed to continue to be at the table where we had an Iranian regime that was at a historic weak point to try to negotiate a deal that could keep a lid on their nuclear program, that could hopefully deal with the other threat in terms of their ballistic missile program. So we need a clear indication from the administration what the goal is here. Is it to continue to pursue the nuclear apparatus that Iran wants to build? Is it to dismantle their ballistic missile program, which is a threat to our own military assets in the region and certainly to Israel? And we need further information on that. I'm hopeful we'll get a full briefing tomorrow.
Just to change the subject for a minute, putting your other hat on, the appropriations has just about passed in every area except Homeland Security. And that is being held up because members of the Democratic Party feel ICE needs to be reformed. They're talking about, you know, removing the mask, putting the body cameras on, maybe using judicial warrants as opposed to administrative. Where do you see that going in the funding of ICE? Now, apparently right now that there is funding for ICE up until 2029, but we don't have funding right now for TSA, Coast Guard, Secret Service. So is this going to be resolved very shortly, or is this going to be dragged on even further?
Well, I think we should deal with the areas where there's broad agreement. And for Coast Guard, for FEMA, for TSA, there are bipartisan negotiated levels that everyone agrees on. So let's pass those things. While we have the continued conversations around accountability for ICE, I think there's some basic measures that ICE needs to adopt to operate more like trusted law enforcement does here in the state of New Hampshire, having de-escalation training, being identified, making sure that you're following the law and the Constitution. So the American people are deeply concerned with what they saw unfold in Minneapolis. We had 2 American citizens that were gunned down by ICE forces. There have been others that have been targeted who have every right to be here in the United States. And so people feel like this is not consistent with our values. And they want to know that there's something we can do about it to make sure that we are truly focused on what can keep our country safe. That should happen through a negotiated process. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the give and take that you would expect by this point in time. Feels like the other side's trying to run out the clock. So let's vote on the areas of Homeland Security where there is agreement now, while there's still further conversation around ICE and Border Patrol and the appropriate funding levels and policies that we need in place so that they're really focused on their core mission. I think that's something that could easily be accomplished this week. If you put bipartisan funding on the floor for Coast Guard, for TSA, you would get 99% of both House and Senate members voting in favor of that. So let's take a win and do what's right in terms of responsible government funding. I hope there's an opportunity for that this week.
Being on the Transportation Committee, you have 2 big bills that hopefully will pass this year. One is the Surface Reauthorization Bill and the Water Recovery Act. One, what are the chances of them being passed? And 2, What are your priorities in those bills?
Well, so if you remember the bipartisan infrastructure law, believe it or not, we are reaching the end of that 5-year program on September 30th of this year. So it's already been 5 years where that has been implemented and has been in place. And it has made a difference in a number of different sectors for New Hampshire. We saw a 28% bump in the amount of money coming to roads and bridges in our state, much more money for water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. So there are a lot of areas of that bill that have worked for New Hampshire where we've seen more projects come to the fore. My big goal in terms of infrastructure as we think about what comes next, and hopefully it's going to be another 5-year bill, which will give the state and our communities a longer look to be able to plan and take advantage of some of these dollars. My priority is to maximize the level of funding that we're getting for New Hampshire. I'll put it in plain and simple terms. We've got to make sure that we're sustaining these record levels of investment, because even though we've been able to deal with some of the backlog, we know that project costs have increased. The costs of construction, of things like steel and aluminum have gone to record highs, and so that's eating into some of these formula funds that have been plussed up by Congress. So we got to take that into consideration as we think about where we can go for the future. We still have a situation in New Hampshire where we have more deficient bridges at the end of our 10-year plan than we do when we start out. And so we've got to work through that backlog because we've got aging infrastructure. We've got to support our communities as they try to build for the future, to invest in things like bike and pedestrian infrastructure, transit services in New Hampshire, which is really important. We don't do well in terms of transportation alternatives, and we've got to find out how we can put more dollars on the table so that there are transit opportunities for New Hampshire, including our aging population, including folks in more rural communities. I'm a big supporter of rail, and that's another thing that will be dealt with in the bill. There will be a rail title in the bill. So in terms of where things stand, the committee's working very well together. This is one of the hidden secrets in Washington. There are actually places where there's good bipartisan work happening today, even through all this chaos and political division, and the Transportation Committee is one of those. We expect to see a bill marked up by our committee and get full bipartisan support sometime this spring. Then what happens after that is a big question. Once it goes to the floor of the House and gets sort of tied up in all the politics of the day, it could be anyone's guess. And I do have the sense that there's going to be another big fight over government funding this year. So potentially this could get tied up in all of that. I hope that we're able to build the kind of bipartisan priority list that has good buy-in from all corners of Congress, so that it will have some momentum behind it, so that when we get down to those conversations about a year-end deal to fund government, it could just sort of be pushed right in there. So those are some of my priorities for New Hampshire around transportation. We've got a big water bill that we have to do, and this bill usually gets through Congress pretty unscathed, and so I'm pretty excited about the opportunity here again for the committee to develop something that's bipartisan and actually see it to fruition. One of the issues we're looking closely at is we've got about 65 dams in New Hampshire that are high hazard dams. If they fail, it would be catastrophic for the state, and so we're looking to get more money into the dam program that could assist New Hampshire at addressing some of the backlog in infrastructure needs there. Number of other priorities across the water space. One of them is we use a lot of salt in the winter here in New Hampshire, and there are issues around the way that it contaminates wells and corrodes our water infrastructure, and so there's a program through the Army Corps that can help us mitigate some of the challenges with respect to road salt usage, so that's something that we're highlighting in the bill. But we always ask New Hampshire Department of Transportation and the communities of our state, what are your priorities? And then we try to reflect and fight for those in the base text of the bill, and so that's what we're doing right now, and we should see text on both of those bills coming up in the next couple months, and hopefully there's still an appetite in Washington to do some good things for the country, even as there may be a lot of squabbles on some of the other issues of the day.
Healthcare continues to dominate the domestic policy, in particular the Medicare cuts from the reconciliation bill from last year and the expiration of the ACA subsidies. The president has announced his plan, the Great Healthcare Plan. Can you talk about his plan and other proposals that you think would generate some interest and maybe even support in passing some of this legislation?
Yeah. Well, it took him a while to put pen to paper and to talk about and enunciate a plan, really from the first time he ran for office until just a few weeks ago. And really, he's got elements of a plan, but It's not a robust plan that's really going to make a difference in terms of the delivery of healthcare and how we lower costs. There's some good things that he's identified in terms of making sure that we're holding the insurance companies accountable, ensuring that we're fighting for price transparency, which I think every patient and consumer wants in this country, and there are good bipartisan bills on that topic that are ready to support. But we have to get at the cost issue. And right now, we're dealing with a couple threats in New Hampshire. Number one, we're going to see billions of dollars come out of our Medicaid program in a way that's going to disrupt the delivery of health care in New Hampshire. It's going to hurt the way that we get health care to underserved and rural residents of New Hampshire, and I'm deeply concerned about that. Second is the failure to reauthorize these premium tax subsidies for folks who have plans on the Affordable Care Act. That's about 40,000 families in New Hampshire that are at risk of dropping their coverage or who have already dropped their coverage. And these are people that are above Medicaid eligibility, but are still struggling based on all the costs that families are dealing with right now to maintain coverage. And I met with a lot of these families, and you know these stories, people who saw their premiums doubling, tripling, quadrupling last year as a result of these premium subsidies going away. And so people are having to make hard choices right now, and we're going to see our uninsured population continue to increase in our state. It's going to put a strain on our health centers and our hospitals in the way that they serve the public here in New Hampshire. And so I'm deeply concerned about this sort of these twin challenges to healthcare affordability and eligibility here in New Hampshire. And we've got to find a fix for it. So I've been involved in bipartisan discussions, in discussions on my side of the aisle with respect to the ACA. I will take any solution that gives people peace of mind and the health security and economic security they need over the course of this year while Congress hashes something else out. In fact, we were actually able to get a bill to the floor of the House that did that, not because the Speaker saw the merit in it, but because enough members were so concerned on behalf of their constituents that we all signed a discharge petition to get a vote on that in the House, which is a really extraordinary action. Unfortunately, we didn't end up seeing the Senate follow through. So we got to figure out how we deal with the immediate threat that New Hampshire families are facing right now with respect to costs, with respect to being insured, and that's what I want Congress to do. And let's talk about all those long-term priorities too. How we make sure that there's transparency, how we lower the cost of prescription drugs, which we know continues to be far too high. Obviously, we made some progress a few years ago with respect to capping costs for seniors on Medicare and insulin prices at $35, making sure that vaccines are free for seniors. There's so much more we have to do to negotiate lower prices and ensure that that will be meaningful. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, everyone should have access to the care that they need that's going to work for them in the right place at the right time. And we all benefit as a result of that. We're all going to pay more, regardless of how we get our insurance, because of Medicaid being cut and the Affordable Care Act not being funded appropriately. You're either going to lose your coverage or you're going to be paying more, and that's not a solution that works for us right now.
You know, another issue that's been important to many of us here in New England is offshore wind. And the Trump administration has been, I think, abundantly clear on its position on offshore wind, having publicly denounced the offshore, the energy source, and vowing not to approve any additional projects. They've gone even further, I think, issuing stop work orders. And your thoughts on the idea of alternative sources of energy and wind being one of them. As we in New England Council, we hear from many businesses throughout New England looking for opportunities for new sources of energy. This is one, and some of the projects that we have affect many of the New England states. What are your thoughts on the wind projects, and is there any support in Congress to say we got to revisit all sources of energy, including alternative?
Well, we clearly need more power on our region's grid. That's been a long-standing problem. It's one of the reasons why we pay some of the highest prices in the country for our electricity. So the fact that you have a wind project, Revolution Wind, that was 80% complete, that this administration decided to try to cancel, makes no sense. Even if you don't believe in the way that project is going to generate power, it's almost done. It's ready to deliver clean power to hundreds of thousands of homes in New Hampshire. And so we need more initiatives like that. There's great promise for offshore wind. There are a number of other projects that are underway. but we could have seen a lot more development given the lease sales that the last administration was undertaking. And this was admittedly a very new industry for New England. We were just beginning to train up the workers, to invest in the portside infrastructure, to have U.S. Maritime involved in deploying these wind turbines. And so I think there was great promise in it. But again, this shouldn't be a situation where we have all our eggs in one basket. We need a lot of different ways to be able to generate the power to meet the needs of our homes and businesses. It's one of the reasons why I was a supporter of the Inflation Reduction Act, which helped provide the kinds of economic incentives that we needed to create clean energy jobs right here locally, to allow people to install rooftop solar on their homes and businesses, to become more energy efficient. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use, and that's the biggest step that we can take to make ourselves more efficient, lower our emissions, and ultimately have an impact on climate change. So we're working to restore those tax credits. I was really disappointed that they were lost as part of that one big, beautiful bill that passed last summer through the reconciliation process, because I met homeowners and businesses that were taking advantage of those initiatives, and it was really making a difference for them. I think of the small manufacturer up in the Conway area of New Hampshire, who got rooftop solar as a result of that initiative, and it was able to help power her manufacturing business that's creating something and employing American workers here. So those are the kinds of things that can make a difference. There's a lot of hunger for that in the business community in New Hampshire. At the community level in our state, we need the federal government to put some good tools on the table that can help. So I think wind holds great promise. If you look at what Texas is doing, as they went through an issue a few years ago and realized we need to become more resilient in terms of our power mix. They've had a lot of wind come online, a lot of solar coming online, which has helped their state diversify and generate more power. We need that sort of thinking here, and need to unleash sort of homegrown clean energy sources that could really make a difference at lowering costs and ensuring it's a sustainable future. So it's an important question.
I think the three states that have the most wind projects and existing wind occurring are in three red states: Texas, Oklahoma, and Iowa. And they rely heavily today on wind supply. So it's kind of interesting. Employers throughout New England all talk about housing affordability. It's a problem in retaining and hiring, I should say, and retaining workers. People are now spending 30% of their income on rent or their mortgage. There's an awful lot of legislation going on in Washington. Is there one or two that you have prioritized that could help address the issue of affordability?
Yeah, this is the biggest issue that New Hampshire faces. If you've seen some of the UNH polling, for years, addiction and mental health were at the top of the list of concerns of folks in our state. Now that's been supplanted by housing specifically. And we know that just the cost of living generally is something that people are reacting to each and every day, but housing is so central to that. We've seen a 170% increase in our median home price. It's now up to $550,000 in the state of New Hampshire, if you can believe that. And we've got a vacancy rate for rentals that's something like 0.3, 0.5%, which is really unhealthy. And so if you're looking to stay in a home, if you're a young person who's looking to get your first apartment or try to plan for home ownership, it's impossible in New Hampshire right now. We've got a supply side challenge with respect to housing. We got to build more. And we haven't done that in an effective way in this state since before the Great Recession. So we're going back to the early 2000s. So we need to put some more tools on the table from the federal government to help our state and communities make some progress. Good news is there are some signs of creativity out there in terms of financing projects and in terms of getting stuff done in a non-traditional way. I think of communities like Dover that have built out a tiny home project. I think of, I was in the Conway area the other day, and in North Conway, they've got this ridgeline development where they receive some of the state housing dollars. And so in addition to there being sort of a memory care unit and long-term housing opportunities for seniors, there's also a tiny home community for workers that are going to provide the health care and also people to live in the community more generally. So we've got to be thinking smart about how we build for the future. Programs like the low-income housing tax credit are oversubscribed, but they're a powerful difference maker in terms of the financial formula of how you get projects done in the state of New Hampshire, along with the Community Development Block Grant. So those are two things that we've long fought to increase, because advocates at New Hampshire Housing and builders across the state will tell us this is what they need to bring a project to fruition and get things done. We also have to look at the community level, because we know that a lot of towns in New Hampshire have had the same rules in place for a long period of time, and we got to urge them to think differently about how they can modernize zoning laws, implementing best practices from around our state, so that we can see more workforce housing be brought to fruition. And so there is a bill that I've supported around incentives for communities so that they can rezone and think creatively about how to build for the future. Those sorts of carrots, I think, are absolutely appropriate and can help make a difference. We passed a major housing bill through the House on a bipartisan basis a few weeks ago that had a number of good provisions, including one that I introduced around pattern books for building. So basically allowing a town to approve the plans for a development, and then allowing others to just sort of take up those plans as a way to reduce the cost of a project. And that's one of many items that is contained in that bill that helps modernize regulation, makes it easier to build, ultimately brings down costs, and puts some more federal tools on the table. We got to be doing a little bit of everything to support our communities right now, because this is just so central to our state's ability to compete. And if you're an employer, which I know a lot of you are, it's almost impossible if you're hiring someone from out of state to make an offer and then have them move here. I've talked to so many leaders who, it comes down to someone taking an offer and then they reject it because they can't find a place to live in the state of New Hampshire. And so this is about our competitive edge. It's about making sure that New Hampshire is an affordable place to call home. We've got to continue to put our heads together on this. The good news is this should be one of the less partisan political issues that is out there. This is just about how we live in New Hampshire, and I'm hopeful that there will continue to be good cooperation from the state to the local to the federal level on this.
You recently reintroduced that Campus Prevention Recovery Services for Students Act. I think that's the name of it. Help colleges and universities prevent alcohol and substance misuse to make sure students have access to recovery. Talk about the meaningful aspect of that bill and how would it impact Granite Staters?
Well, we've been working with folks in higher ed on this, and we know that addiction continues to be a tough challenge for our state and for people of all backgrounds and from all different walks of life. But we can't forget, students that are struggling. And too often, they don't have the resources out there or the connections to the broader community to be able to get the help that they need. And so this would be about implementing evidence-based practices on campuses across the country and creating a new grant program that provides direct support to our university system, to colleges and universities to be able to have services available to students. We've found in too many cases there just isn't that connection to the help that people need when they need it. There also isn't the sort of education and prevention that goes on campus that can help students identify the risk and stay safe. So we want to make sure that young people in particular have the tools to be able to live full and healthy lives and be able to stay on the right path. And that means making sure that they can get addiction treatment and recovery services when they need it. And so this is really just a partnership and grant opportunities for universities to make sure students have that help.
As you know, the Supreme Court ruled about 10 days ago. The administration does not have the authority to impose tariffs under, I think it's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Now that the Supreme Court has ruled against the president, companies across the United States will look to get their money back, which is upwards of $175 billion, I believe. So how do you envision these funds being distributed? And then second, how will Congress respond to the White House simply pivoting to other tariffs to achieve their goals?
Well, I think the decision was a good one. It was good in terms of recognizing the cost that American families are bearing as a result of this, about $1,000 for the average New Hampshire family that they paid in additional costs because of tariffs just last year alone. but also in terms of just what the law says and what the Constitution says. It's the Article I branch of Congress, of our government, Congress, that has the authority to levy taxes and levy tariffs, not the president. Now, some of that power has been assigned to the executive branch through some of the laws that the president is now utilizing. But the court was clear and the law was clear under IEPA that the president didn't have the authority to use his emergency powers to levy tariffs. So I think that was an important decision in terms of the constitutional order in Washington. Now, what comes next is going to be tricky because getting refunds back to ultimately to customers, to American people, to small businesses, is going to be a challenge. As you mentioned, several $100 billion were paid into these tariffs over the course of the last year. And so I think Congress needs to step up to the plate and require refunds. I think there are ways these companies and importers have handled tariffs so that there's a paper trail and they can get back ultimately to people that were purchasing products. But this is a huge tax on the American people. And I think that tariffs can be used in a very focused way to protect jobs and industries in our country. But the way they've been utilized is incredibly haphazard and has created a lot of uncertainty, and that's going to only continue. So I hope that these sort of new tariffs that the president is putting in place, 15%, it appears that it'll only be for a limited period of time that he can do that. But this is not a smart economic strategy. This is a time where things cost far too much across the board. Again, there's a huge cost to families in New Hampshire as a result of that. It's not creating jobs in any sector in the United States, and even in manufacturing, which is what the president has said he wants to do. We can support our manufacturers, and I've talked to a lot of them over the last year, who are pulling back on hiring, are not buying that new equipment because their input costs have gone up, and because the economic picture is so uncertain around the corner. So we need to be smart about how we have an industrial policy that actually is going to grow jobs here in this country and make it better to do business here. Tariffs do not help anyone. And I think we've just got to figure out how we continue to push hard to get more relief. I've introduced legislation that would exempt small businesses from tariffs, that would exempt groceries that you buy in the grocery store from tariffs. About half of the produce that's in our grocery store comes from somewhere else. And so they've been subjected to tariffs. We should be growing more things here in the United States, but just slapping a tariff on it isn't going to effectuate that. We've got to think smart about workforce development, about immigration, about other ways that we can increase productivity in our own country and make more things here. Just decreeing a tariff doesn't do that. It just raises costs.
You know, over the years, you've been recognized as one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. And yet, people are believing that Congress is becoming more and more polarized, that we're all going to the edges, and rather than to the center and trying to work on problems. And we also have a record number of retirements this year in the House, well over 50 members, both Democrat, Republican, retiring. What are your thoughts on this? And is there a widening gap between the two parties?
Well, I think you're right that there is increased polarization in Washington. We all see it. There's no doubt about that. The question is, do you want to work to address it and actually make our system more functional and try to break through to get things done, or do you just want to continue to allow the system to do what it does? And I think there are great ways in New Hampshire that we can roll up our sleeves and get to know each other and focus on, at the end of the day, how we make people's lives better. And strengthen our communities. We need more of that way of thinking in Washington. And so I'm not willing to give up on bipartisanship. Mm-hmm. I think that it's incredibly important for us, even at a time where there's big disagreement on issues that are rooted in our constitutional framework, on things like health care, on the inequities in our economy. Why wouldn't you want to work with someone to increase care for veterans, or to make sure that we get more roads paved in the state of New Hampshire? It's only common sense that you would take the wins that you can get so that we can improve the lives of our state and our communities while you fight on all the other issues that are really important to our state. And so I've made the commitment to try to find partners across the aisle that I can work with. I'm part of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. There have been a lot of problems that we haven't solved in that caucus, by the way. I think you can understand that. But you can build relationships with people. And ultimately, that's the building block for how you find ways to open the door and to partner. And so we've done some good things just over the course of the last year. Said we're teeing up this major infrastructure bill. We've got a veteran program passed that's going to be stood up soon that provides support for veterans that are at risk of becoming foreclosed on. So there are things that you can get done, and I think that's just a New Hampshire way of kind of approaching the problems of the day. Frankly, we've got too many people in Washington who feel like they only have to worry about winning a primary election and not facing the rest of the voters who are out there. And the incentives are in the wrong place. And this sort of gerrymandering effort, which is on steroids right now, is only going to make that worse. And we have a solution for that. We can ban partisan gerrymandering across the country so that there have to be fair maps in every state. And that would mean that there are more people that have to go home and listen and be proximate to people's challenges and find ways to work together. I think that could be the biggest thing to help decrease the extremism and focus on bringing people to a practical place where we can solve problems.
There is legislation to do away with the mid-decennial census. At one time, we had the redistricting done every 10 years. Now, because of what's happened in Texas and Florida and maybe California, we're doing it, it seems like it every 6 years. It could be every 4 years and 2 years if somebody decides. There is legislation to do away with that mid-decennial. How serious are your colleagues about doing away with that and going back to doing the decennial every 10 years?
Well, I think that you're right. The redistricting is happening in real time. And it's not just even every 2 years. It's like, states are doing it multiple times over one election cycle. This isn't fair. Again, this is people trying to draw seats for a partisan advantage. And I think that's why we need Congress to establish some framework here that creates greater fairness, requires nonpartisan commissions to help draw districts at the state level, and make sure that we're not doing this perpetually over a decade. Let's do it when the numbers come out, and then let's move on to the day-to-day work of governing. That's really where the focus should be.
We have time for a couple of questions. I know AARP has a question. Kevin Dunnew, who has his Irish knit sweater on. Very appropriate, Kevin, with your question.
Congressman Pappas, AARP's mission is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. What do you think the priority should be to make New Hampshire an even better place for people to live as they age?
Well, thanks for the question. I'm glad we got huge AARP representation here today. Thanks for all of your work. I was with someone from the New Hampshire Commission on Aging recently, and they said that a recent survey that they put out, I guess they're going to be releasing it soon, but talked about medical transportation to appointments, that was a concern for 96% of seniors in the state of New Hampshire. And I think I mentioned that before in my conversation with Jim around the infrastructure law. We got to have more transportation options for folks here in the state. I know that there are a lot of great organizations out there that have volunteer drivers that provide that kind of support to folks who need it, but we haven't seen enough volunteers stepping to the fore that have the qualifications to be able to do that sort of work. So I think we both need to support organizations that are doing that, but also provide more transit opportunities. And I'm hopeful that there's a way that in that legislation we can provide more direct support to New Hampshire to think creatively about how it can make those connections for people. I think caregiving is an issue that we've long discussed with AARP, and we know there are several 100,000 people in the state of New Hampshire that are providing care to a family member, often at great financial sacrifice to themselves. They put their own career on hold to be able to provide for a spouse, for a child, for a parent, and we need more supports for our caregivers. And so whether that's better in-home supports, respite care, all that those are things that we should be fighting for as this healthcare conversation moves forward in Washington. So just really grateful for your advocacy and support. We've got some really big issues on the table, from protecting Medicare and Social Security, just ensuring that we're acting to bring down costs of things like prescription drugs. And AARP is a real strong voice in that conversation. So we look forward to continuing to engage with you all.
Other questions for the Congressman? Just raise your hand. Okay. Just identify yourself.
Yeah, Eric Griffin with East Coast Lumber. I'm actually here on behalf of the New Hampshire Retail Lumber Association.
Okay.
So I appreciate your comments on housing. That's obviously
Yep.
at the forefront of our frustration in our whole state. Specifically, I'm wondering on your thoughts, what thoughts you have regarding the Credit Card Competition Act. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Credit card use is no longer a convenience. In our industry, credit card fees are actually the third largest cost of our business, running only behind, or running just behind our inventory. The single location lumberyard like yourself pays almost $500,000 a year just for credit card employees. And there's no transparency, it's hidden. And I believe last year, there was a lot of conversation in Congress about it. It seemed like it was relatively bipartisan. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this issue.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question, and would love to continue to stay in touch just about what you're seeing, because we know that your kind of business is so important to, how we build the kind of future that we need here in New Hampshire and address some of the pressing challenges like housing. You know that I come out of a small business background, and so I've lived this. The amount that you're paying every year to credit card fees, if you're a retailer, if you're a small business, continues to just escalate. And you probably get pinged every day like I used to by these folks that want to take on your processing for your credit cards. And it's never apples to apples. You can never compare one proposal to another and kind of figure out like what rates are we talking about and is this actually going to save me money? It's also confusing. And so I think that's one of the big issues that we got to get at. Just some clarity and transparency so that you know what these charges are going to look like and you can better plan for this. But we've got to figure out how to rein this in. I mean, cash is becoming such a small proportion of the transactions that we're seeing in business these days. And increasingly these, electronic payments are just eating into folks' bottom lines. So we're paying close attention to that. The action really was on the Senate side. The big push really wasn't in the House. And so it's the Durbin-Marshall credit card competition bill that we had heard on a number of different occasions was going to be pushed through the Senate, but it hasn't made it yet. But we want to continue to figure out ways that we can support our small businesses, and I think some fairness around fees and some transparency in terms of credit card transactions is absolutely appropriate. Thanks.
Talking about a very, very, very difficult issue to tackle, and an issue that Americans are very, very worried about is AI. Almost half of Americans say AI will have a mostly negative impact on the human race. 7 in 10 are concerned about AI putting people out of work permanently, and 53% say it's at least somewhat likely that AI will destroy humanity. And yet, I think 6 in 10 U.S. adults report using AI at the same time. Do the Democrats have a AI proposal or solution? There are some people that say leave it to the states, come up with their own. Others are saying have one national policy on AI.
Well, I think we're behind in terms of focusing on a regulatory structure that would make sense. And I don't think this should just fall to one party or the other, but there is a real difference that we're seeing in Washington these days, where it feels like Republicans want no regulation at all. They just want this to be the Wild West. And I think increasingly people are really concerned with the proliferation of AI, the way that it can harm people in terms of their health, that it can hurt consumers in terms of privacy. We should really be concerned with this. Look, we all want the good aspects of AI, right? Yeah. We all want AI to cure diseases and to make our lives easier, but we don't want the bad aspects of it. And we want the United States to be leading with respect to developing this technology, because we know how important that is to the competitiveness of our nation and making sure that our economy is reaping the benefits from it. I think of what the Department of Defense has recently gone through with Anthropic, an AI firm that provides support for DoD. And they, in their company charter, decided that they didn't want to develop AI if it was going to be utilized and cut out a human being from the chain of command in terms of the use of weapons. And they wanted to make sure that, their AI systems, that they were contracted to provide for the Department of Defense were not used for mass surveillance. And I think those are both things that we all should support. We want humans to decide whether or not weapons are used. We want to make sure that we're not surveilled on a mass basis in our country. I mean, that's sort of part of who we are in New Hampshire. So I think they've highlighted something that's incredibly important. I hope it causes Congress to really think hard about the choices we need to make. We need some basic guardrails, but saying we can't do anything, or even saying, as the majority wanted to do in the reconciliation bill last year, that we're not going to let states do any sort of regulation on AI, that's just a huge giveaway to big tech, and is going to come at the expense of the safety of people in our country and the privacy of the American public. And I don't want to give that up. So I do think that we should be working towards some sensible regulations, and I'm hopeful over the course of the next year we'll see some good proposals be put on the table. But I think it's going to be tough in this political environment in Washington.
Well, I want to thank the Congressman for an enlightening and informative discussion. I want to thank all of you for coming here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Hit all the issues.